Good morning.
Good morning.
I think they're trying to figure out the slides, but I can start my preface. So I was asked to share my testimony, and it made me think of the fact that throughout our life we've had a lot of tests. Is this too loud? Sorry. But really our perspective on God plays a role in how these tests become a testimony or not, and whether we want to share it with other people. And according to the internet, a testimony is a solemn attestation as to the truth of a matter. A lot of what I had deemed as truth before and after my conversion differed. So I'll frame my sermon as such. How I used to tell my story to how I've been able to see it as with God now, who gives me the truth. So with that, if we can all bow our heads for prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for today, Lord. Thank you for all the people that are here and for the people that are not able to be here, Lord. I pray that through this time that I tell really of your glory in my life, that it will touch the lives of others and it will be a blessing somehow. I pray that your Holy Spirit will speak through me, and I pray that the message is clear. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Okay. So I'm guessing we will have slides, which is okay. But I wanted to start my story about telling you about my sister. So she's the first person in our family to really explore what having a faith really means. So we grew up where Buddhism was practiced culturally, but we were never explained of why we were doing the things that we were doing. We would worship ancestors and all these things and go to temple, but that was all for holidays or weddings or other events like that. So it was never encouraged for us to have any type of spiritual life. She's the oldest daughter in our family, and she's had to wear many hats. But the main role that she has played in my life, I believe, is being a prayer warrior. She prayed for 8 years that I would, get to know God. And she had some points where she really didn't think I would convert until my deathbed. So it tells you like a little sliver of how stubborn I was, and how much I really didn't think I needed God. But here I am to say before you that prayers do work. So my story will begin where I was born, and like I said, tests kind of just happen in our lives, and they're never usually something we ask for, and that's including birth, right? I didn't ask to be born, but here I am. And I was born in Cambodia, and in a lot of ways, my upbringing has continued to be a test for me. I'm haunted by the memories that my parents and my relatives have to relive in their minds due to post-traumatic stress disorders from the bombings by the U.S. and the 4 long years of genocide that followed after. It's a story that I have to keep relearning because the details have never been fully disclosed to me, but I felt the effects of that at every stage of my life. And for a long time, this history gave me a lot of grief and anger, but what I realized is that without this upbringing, I probably would never think of doing anything related to Cambodia. And I've been able to go there multiple times, doing different projects and serve, using my privileges in the U.S. and my education to do something meaningful. And it's also the literal reason why I'm here in Seattle going to school. We migrated to the U.S. when I was 6 years old, and it wasn't easy. I actually thought that coming to the U.S. meant I'll instantly be rich and everyone lives in mansions, because, coming from like a third world setting, it's like, U.S. is like grand, and everyone's rich, and we all have mansions. That's not here, that's probably in heaven, right? But yeah, we actually came here, and it was a really difficult life for my family and I. We grew up in poverty, and there are a lot of memories that I honestly blocked out, so I can't tell you much about my childhood, but I knew it was difficult. So, starting back to this slide, the biggest test in my life, I believe, is having a mom who suffers from bipolar disorder and PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Though I'm grateful for everything she's done in my life, by first of all giving me life and sustaining me and working so hard to feed and support our family, it was hard, and especially when she had her manic episodes and went through periods of not sleeping for an entire week at a time. It wasn't pleasant. I didn't really grow up having a mother figure in that sense, because instead of her taking care of me, I had to take care of her. I was the one bringing her to the doctors when I was younger. And the night that really changed my life was when I was in 6th grade. I was 11 years old, and this followed her whole week of not sleeping because she was really stressed out. And it was the first time I had witnessed her first manic episode in the US. So this was in the dead of night. She was screaming all over the house, and she was forcing us to kneel and bow down and then get up again to worship the spirits that she was trying to calm down. At this stage, she was seeing and hearing things, and she just had a lot of energy. And, you know, as an 11-year-old, I was trying to bear it as much as I could, but I was at the point where I was so tired and I was in pain, and I was seeing my mom in pain, so I broke into tears, and I had to be escorted out. And later the paramedics came and they rolled her away in a gurney. And just to give you an idea of how excited she was, they had to give her 2 shots of tranquilizers to calm her down. And I remember that night, I looked at the sky and I was wondering why this was happening and who I could blame. But I didn't really have much time to investigate. I realized years later that because of a mental breakdown, God actually used it to work a miracle by pushing up our immigration status and giving us the documents, and she later became a naturalized citizen years after. I realized also at the time that I had a mission in life. It was to do my best in school so I could become a doctor and help my mom and others like her. The doctor part did not happen, but we'll get into that later. And in my senior year of high school, my mom had another mental breakdown. This time I was a little more prepared since I, was older and had knowledge. But I was completely understaffed, as I like to say, because the first breakdown I had the luxury of having my sisters and some relatives help with that. But this time it was just my dad and I. But we managed. I managed to get through, and I just tried to do my best to keep her as calm as possible. But she was already really quickly descending down into another manic episode. And time eventually would heal that wound. But again, my way of coping was just diving into my academics. So I worked really hard on my college applications and scholarships, and I became super socially isolated in my last semester of high school because I really wanted to get out of there. I grew up in Vegas, and that's not pleasant for me. And yeah, I really just wanted to leave and not look back. And I didn't realize it at the time, but that was the beginning of one of the first phases of my depression. And it was even worsened when I moved to California. As soon as I graduated, I just left with the intention of escaping. And I did so by spending the days in my sister's apartment in the dark, not letting any light come in, so I could binge watch Korean dramas all day long. So I distracted myself from the pain. And I continued to mask my depression throughout my first semester in college, but finally broke during my second semester when I began to have thoughts of hurting myself. I was in a toxic relationship, and I sought for methods of escape that were far more damaging than just daydreaming about Korean movie stars. This is where the testimony comes in. I was blinded by pain, but honestly, my mom's breakdown really was a blessing in my life. It was because of the breakdowns that I had the drive to serve others. And because of those things, I was able to get into UC Berkeley on a full ride scholarship as a Gates Millennium Scholar. Thank you, Uncle Bill, by the way. And my depression wasn't pleasant, but it led me to take a semester off doing mission work in Cambodia and also in the leper colonies in China. Yeah. I came into contact with such loving people, and they showed me that despite being so isolated and abandoned and having very little in their life, they could still have so much love and light and joy. It really made an impact on me. And that kept me going for a little bit. My time in China ended quicker than I wanted to, but my love for service was rekindled, so that was good. I came back and I worked on this project where we brought students out into the Navajo Nation and we helped with different projects there. And in addition to this, I used every excuse I could to travel. So at the end of 4 years, I had been to almost 30 countries. And I don't know if, yeah. So I think I put this a little bit out of order. So I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a little bit of a cycle that I would go through. So to sustain myself, right? I would have mental health issues, and then I'd find some unhealthy coping mechanisms, and then I'd usually get out of it by redirecting all of that into service projects or something related to school, because that's where I was like, oh, I got this after all. But then it would just go back to the slippery slope of having more mental health problems. So it was not sustainable at all. That's why it's in quotes. And for a long time, I tried to act like this wasn't something that I was dealing with. I was living the dream life, really, that my parents would never even think about living the life that I had lived if they were my age. And I had so much to be grateful for. So these thoughts would cloud my head quite a lot, and I would feel really anxious or depressed. And these thoughts would also evolve into extreme guilt that kept me from experiencing any sense of true relief and freedom. Like, there were so many times when I was traveling where I would be like, oh, this is what peace is like, right? Like, I walk around these beautiful beaches, and I just would like, oh, okay, I think this is it. I think I found it. But it was funny because it would only last for like a second, and then all these thoughts would come about like the fact that, number one, I was alone, I was in a place where I didn't know the language, I would have to find a way back home, and then also I always had this thought when I was walking around beaches, like all the coral are dying. It's like, so it was like very temporary, and it didn't keep me really afloat for so long. Even though I was in these beautiful places, I couldn't fully enjoy it because of my anxiety. And for a long time, the travels were a huge part of my identity. I was able to run around and also run away from my problems all the time, but I later learned that it was also God teaching me how to depend on Him. Like I said, I often traveled alone, so there were a lot of moments where it could have gone south really, really quickly. Like, I was pretty dumb, because I was like, oh, adventure, but sometimes, like, I was just really stupid. And it could have gone south really quickly, but I think when I was later reflecting on it, I was like, oh, that was totally God that, like, stepped in. So examples of this is like I would find myself wandering the roads of Cinque Terre in Italy in the early morning before the crack of dawn, when a housing situation definitely was not what I had expected it to be. Or that, I had been left behind in Nicaragua when I was trying to go back to Costa Rica, or that I couldn't find a way back to Havana before my next flight the next morning. So, but it really taught me, like, hey, like, you have no one, literally no one. So, there was someone there, but I didn't realize that it was God. And when I came back to Oakland, it became really clear that God wanted me to recognize Him and to get for me to get to know Him as well. This, I don't know if you can read it, but this was a desperate plea that I posted on Facebook. I had, maybe some of you who have gone through school have this experience of this post-grad life where you had like all these plans and then like none of them like came through at all, and you're just like, I have nothing. So that's kind of what I went through, because I had all these plans about finding this job, and I was going to take community classes to fulfill some prerequisites for a program I honestly can't even remember that I was trying to apply to. And I was going to rent this apartment in downtown Berkeley. So I moved in. It was a shared apartment, and within the and I actually never slept there. I ended up getting really sick and became bedridden for a week, and I just stayed at my sister's the whole time, even though all my stuff and my bed was in the new apartment. And it was where I was, getting fed and cared for, so I wanted to stay. But then this thought came to my head, and it was like very clear. Like, I was like, what am I doing here? Like, why was I trying to take these classes? Why was I trying to enroll in blank program? Again, I can't even remember the program. It just didn't make any sense anymore. And it was a huge wave of like uncertainty that I had. I realized that after 4 years at this great university, I had no idea what I was doing with my life. But there was one thing that I was super, super clear about, that I really didn't want to live in this apartment. It just wasn't a good situation. Just a tip, never try to rent something from abroad, because you won't get the full picture until you get there. And this was a time where it was like, the second semester of college, so a lot of people already had their living situations figured out. It's not easy to find someone to just take your spot. And let me tell you, friends, like, I can honestly say I've never been so distressed and distraught in my entire life. I was literally doing everything I could. I posted on all those pages and truly begging people to take my spot, because I was like, I really don't want this. And it was really hard for me, because I had to just watch the days go by where no one was taking it up. And it was expensive. This is the Bay Area after all. And I paid my deposit. And so it was like really torture for me, because I thought I had everything in control, but I didn't. And I was doing everything I could. And I would have breakdowns pretty regularly during this time. And there was one day where I truly, truly broke down. And my sister has prayed with me in the past before, and I'm just like, okay, that's nice, thank you. I never truly believed that it really did much. But this was the one time where I was so broken, and she was praying for me. And I remember crying, and I was like, okay, you know what, fine. I will give this to you, Lord, whatever this is. I literally cannot do anything else. So let's give this God thing a chance and see what happens, because I'm totally just, there's nothing else I could do at that point. So God took that chance that I was giving him. A week or two passed by, and finally someone committed to my spots, and I got my full deposit back, and everything had been taken care of. Mm-hmm. But let me remind you that this whole ordeal of not finding someone lasted an entire month. So someone needed to pay that rent for that month that spot wasn't occupied. That someone was not me. That someone was not the person who rented from me. I believe that someone was God. And I think that was like the first very obvious miracle that he was showing me, that, hey, maybe you do need me. And my siblings, they've always been involved in ministry, but I never really saw the benefit for it myself. I knew they were doing good things, and they were good people, and I saw how drastically God had changed my sister's heart when she converted. But I didn't think that I needed the change in myself, because I felt like I was a good person. I was doing good things. Look at all this service project. Look at all this academic stuff. But the last breakdown that I had at that moment made me realize I actually really don't have anything to hold on to. The ways that I was used to feeling validated and valued were really just superficial. It helped me cover up some pain and brokenness that I had felt, but I never really processed any of that correctly. And so it was that moment where it was like my truest rock bottom in life. But it was great though, because since you're at the bottom, you have nowhere else to look but up. And my brother-in-law, okay, great. My brother-in-law started the Fruit Tree. It's a health food ministry / business that sold organic green smoothies at farmers markets. And he let me stay at his apartments on the condition that I help out with the business. So I was so desperate. I was like, fine, okay, I'll do it. But God really used this as an opportunity to get to know him better. I was able to be involved in the ministry first and foremost, but I was also able to create really great friendships with the people who were really dedicated to serving God. And through those relationships, I became more willing to explore why having God in someone's life can make any difference. I had such a powerful experience with him during that apartment crisis that I was finally willing to learn more about him. So I was open to Bible studies, but I asked a ton of questions, and they were answered over time. And I began to find myself being more open to having a relationship with God myself. So this also led me to be more accepting of the help that I was offered. As I was getting to know God, I was still pretty depressed and anxious about a lot of things, but I didn't have health insurance. I think my slides are a little out of order. This is preview, preview. Yeah, sorry. So I didn't have health insurance, and my sister recommended me to talk to a friend of hers. His name was Paul Konev. He's a licensed marriage and family therapist, and he was graciously willing to talk to me. And I thought I was going to get free counseling sessions, but he actually ended up praying with me. He started a prayer ministry called Straight to the Heart. And during the sessions, I was still not super solid in my faith, and I didn't understand a lot of the references sometimes, but I still believe that it has been one of the greatest pieces of how my story has shifted from the narrative I used to create for it. It's the concept that it's Christ who must suffer, and he chose to connect his story with our story, to heal our hearts and to set us free. That's the hidden half of the gospel. And through our sessions, I learned to identify my root negative thoughts that were sending me through these cycles of poor mental health. And I was encouraged to see how Jesus was abandoned, abused, and rejected in the ways that I had experienced. Knowing that Christ knows what I had gone through because he had gone through it himself. I invited him in these areas of my heart to carry the pain from the ways that I had been hurt. And I'd be happy to share these materials with anyone if they're interested later. This was life-changing for me, and the relationship that was beginning to bud with God. I was expecting a counselor to listen to my problems and help me fix it, but he actually listened to my problem and helped me take it to God so that he could fix it. It helped me build my confidence and trust in the Lord, and in combination of the ministry I was involved in, and the Bible studies I had received, and the support from family and friends, I decided to get baptized in mid-May 2018.
Amen.
So yeah, time went by really fast after my baptism. A few weeks afterwards, I went to Army Bible Camp, and there I met Julie O'Carey, and she graciously offered me an assignment to do in Cambodia with ASAP Ministries.
Amen.
A few weeks after that, I moved to Cambodia with no idea really how this was going to turn out, but began to lean on this new figure in my life named Jesus. I actually had planned this move to Cambodia before my baptism with this goal of learning to be totally fluent in my language and learning how to read and write in Khmer, which is very hard to do. But I was so busy there that I barely had enough time to sleep. God filled my schedule up. I was helping around with different ministries, teaching, collecting interviews, taking photos, and also ended up translating for medical doctors, and even did Bible work in my hometown church. The most amazing thing was actually giving Bible studies in Khmer, which I never thought that would ever happen because it's like a very hard thing to do. But God just kind of pushes you in different ways, and he gives you just enough strength to get through it. I also got a chance to do a 2-week mission trip in the Philippines, which was an amazing experience and helped me find some footing while I was in another rocky period of my life. And yeah, I still had a lot of mental health issues. I hope you didn't think that those just went away when I got baptized. I wish, right? But it was really interesting because I wanted to show you another example of how I was faced with another test. But this time, I got through it because of God. And my mom had visited me when she was in Cambodia. Oh, sorry, when I was in Cambodia. She visited me before I planned my actual like departure date. And so the moment I saw her land, I knew that she wasn't doing well. She was already like super anxious, and I was just like, oh, okay, this is it. This is my preparation. I prayed that we would get through the 2 weeks, and thank God we managed to at least leave the country. I think things would have been a lot worse and more difficult if she had a breakdown in Cambodia. I really wouldn't know how that would end up. But she ended up having a manic episode on the plane from Taiwan to San Francisco. I don't think there's been, I'm hoping, I'm praying that I will never have such a long flight in my life. It was 10 hours, but it felt like eternity. Yeah, like she was already not sleeping the nights before, and neither was I, because she was just like up and about. And so I was trying to do everything I could to calm her down, and I was like, we had this one pill, like sleeping pill with us, and I was like, Mom, you should take this. Mom, you really should take this. And she's like, why are you trying to drug me? And I was like, hey, okay, don't say it like that. So, she was really resistant, and she just was not, she was just really, really anxious, and she was hearing voices and whatnot, but thank God we were in a confined space. She was trapped in the middle, so she couldn't like move around. And also thank God that the person sitting next to her was like so patient and like totally chill with the fact that she was having a breakdown. She wasn't like really acting out like how she had been in the previous times, but she was just really, really anxious, and she would just say repetitive things, and like the way that she got through it, I think was just like gripping on to me. Like her grip was really strong. I literally had to fight her to use the restroom once during those 10 hours, and I have a pretty small bladder, so that was really tough. But yeah, I literally had to fight for her to let me use the restroom. But we just really prayed through that time, and I would try to let her pray, and we would just pray together, and I would try to do different things to just kind of distract her from all her anxieties. And thank God, like after watching the clock for 10 hours, literally just watching the minutes go by, because I couldn't do anything. I would try to sleep, and then she'd be like, why are you sleeping? We gotta get out of here, because she thought the plane was gonna leave us even though we were on the plane. So it just tells you, there's not much logic during that time. When we finally landed, I was just able to breathe again, because God was like, all right, thank you for hearing our prayers. It was also hard for us to actually get out of the plane, because she was just she wanted to leave all our stuff behind so we could just leave, but some of you who have traveled abroad with family know that when you're coming back from your home country, you have a ton of stuff. So we had a lot. And I really think God sent a few amazing angels that day, because there was someone who was really, she was a small Asian woman, and she managed to carry these giant loads of backpacks. And I'm like, I'm so sorry, but thank you. And then someone else, helped and brought a wheelchair, because she was not willing to move, and wheeled her. And not that I didn't want to help my mom at this time, but like I said, that grip was really strong, and she would not let me do anything. She wouldn't let me use my phone. She just was holding on to me really strongly. And she finally broke down at customs when we were, getting our passports stamped and whatnot. And it was really quite a spectacle. She was really crying and yelling at me that I wasn't giving her a phone, because that was one of her trigger points. And she was begging me, and I was like, I'll give you your phone, just get off so we can leave. But it was really difficult for us to get through that. But eventually, someone was kind enough to call the medics, and she was hospitalized, and she was in the psych ward for 3 weeks. And she's recovered a lot since then, though. She did this treatment in San Diego that really helped her. And I really honestly have never seen my mom so healthy and engaged. So I really praise God for the ways that He continues to care for her. Usually my mom, due to meds, she just doesn't have any emotional engagements. So you have to really like poke at her for her to like talk with you. But now she's like, oh, I'm swimming, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And you're like, who are you? But in the best way possible. So why did I tell you that story though? It's because when I came back to the US, my mental health was also really poor. I came back to a broken community. The friends that I had made prior to my adventure were gone. I didn't have a church home to go to, and I was, on top of that, suffering from PTSD myself. I didn't have a social life. It was tough. But then I brought up the prayer sheet again, and I started to pray. And I realized that this was another way that God was testing me. And I realized it was truly Jesus that I needed to lean on. Not the environment, not the friends, but really him. And I thought about the ways that he was rejected and abandoned, and the pain that he experienced. And slowly but surely, he gave me peace and healing that truly sustained. I wouldn't be sharing this all with you if it didn't. So it sticks. And I see everyone's still awake, so I'm going to keep going for a little bit longer. When I was reflecting on the story that God has given me, I realized I could actually relate a lot with Elijah. He did this huge grand thing, and for me that was like scholarships and traveling. And then this fear just totally overtook him, and it was to the point where he wanted to die. I didn't really have that experience, but I had some sense of that. But it was interesting how God healed him, because rather than pushing him harshly, God took care of his physical needs first by feeding him and giving him that time to heal, like Jesus often did when he healed people. And it was only when God deemed that Elijah was ready did he address his spiritual needs. Sometimes it takes us a while to overcome our brokenness, and it happens step by step through the grace of God. But we also have a role to play in that too. We have to be willing to be fed. For a long time, I was really resistant to the idea of being fed by someone, but I realized that what I was feeding myself wasn't really keeping me alive. I could have really easily, developed my relationship with God so much earlier. My sister actually would sneak a Bible into my luggage every time I would go on a long trip, but I was too prideful to open it, so this one I opened. And when I finally got to the point where I realized how much I needed something more than what the world could offer, I began to be full of light and warmth. So I hope that my story gives you a perspective on, first of all, mental health and people with mental health issues. We all have some form of them to an extent, and I know vulnerability can be difficult. I don't expect us all to share to the extent that I did, but I hope that whatever stress or trigger points or trauma that you have, you're able to give it to God and be willing to receive his healing. And that when he asks you, what are you doing here? In this cage of depression and despair, that you'll be honest and willing to share your pain and brokenness with him, so he can build you up and bring you forth as gold. And we have the promise of Jesus, that with his stripes we are healed. And also the promise of Isaiah 43, verse 2. Do you all want to turn that with me? It's Isaiah 43, verse 2. Are you all there? I went too fast. So this verse says, when thou passest through the water, I will be with thee, and through the rivers they shall not overflow thee. And when thou walkest through the fire, thou shalt not be burned, neither shall the flame kindle upon thee. So this always gives me a lot of hope and courage, because I know that whatever test life throws at us next, that God is with me, and I'll get through it, and he knows how much I can handle. So hopefully, when I have more issues that come up, I won't need to feel so burned to the point where I'm so broken. I can come out of it seeing how God saved me, and I can share that with others. And I wanted to end with this poem that my sister actually, she sent me when I was going through this anxiety about my apartment. And I really didn't like it actually the first time I saw it, because I was like, seriously, this is not helpful. Because again, I didn't have that faith. And I felt like it was kind of like mocking me in a sense, because I was just told to wait. But I think it's really helpful now that I look back. And I don't know the author, it's an anonymous poem, but hopefully it will be a blessing to you as well. So it says, desperately, helplessly, longingly I cried. Quietly, patiently, loving God replied. I pled and I wept for a clue to my fate, and the master said so gently, child, you must wait. Wait? You say wait? My indignant reply. Lord, I need answers. I need to know why. Is your hand shortened, or have you not heard? By faith I have asked and claiming your word. My future and all which I can relate hangs in the balance, and you tell me to wait. I need a yes, a go-ahead sign, or even a no, to which I can resign. And Lord, you promised that if we believed, we need but to ask, and we shall receive. And Lord, I've been asking, and this is my cry. I'm weary of asking. I need a reply. Then quietly, softly, I learned of my fate, as my master replied once again, you must wait. So I slumped in my chair, in defeat and taught, and grumbling to God, so I'm waiting for what? He seemed then to kneel, and his eyes wept with mine, and he tenderly said, I could give you a sign. I could shake the heavens and darken the sun. All you seek I could give, and pleased you would be. You would have what you want, but you wouldn't know me. You'd not know the depth of my love for each saint. You'd not know the power I give to the faint. You'd not learn to see through the clouds of despair. You'd not learn to just trust by knowing I'm there. You'd not know the joy of resting in me when darkness and silence were all you could see. You never experienced that fullness of love as the peace of my spirit descends like a dove. You know that I give and I save for a start, but you not know the depth of the beat of my heart. The glow of my comfort late into the night, the faith I have given you when you walk without sight. The depth that is beyond just getting what you asked of the infinite God who makes you have last. You never know, should your pain quickly flee, what it means that my grace is sufficient for thee. Amen. Yes, your dreams for your loved ones overnight would come true, but oh the loss if I lost what I'm doing in you. So be silent, my child, and in time you will see that the greatest of gifts is to get to know me. And though oft my answer seems terribly late, my most precious answer is still late. Thank you. Amen.